Hey, we are your hosts, Nick Smith.
And Kylie Jo Smith. And today's episode is called, Are They Better Than You? Sorry, I had it written differently than it is on the thing.
Are they better than you?
Well, see, it's hard.
Who are they?
Anybody.
Who them?
Anybody who thinks they're better than me. So this conversation comes up a lot. I remember having this conversation anytime we have gone to a new setting to do ministry, or I've discussed with particularly women who are not part of a church, like, hey, you should come to church. The number one thing that I have heard from women is, well, I don't want to go because I just feel judged. I feel like everybody there thinks they're better than me.
So it's not just women, though. I've heard that from men as well.
Okay.
I've heard men say the same thing, like, oh, they just think they're so good. And there's also this underlying statement that people say that carries the same tone, but it's just worded different, of like, well, I couldn't go in there because the church would burn down if I walked in.
Right.
But it's not even the church, in church situations alone. Like, this happens a lot where people are automatically putting this barrier where they're thinking about other people, thinking about what they
think about themselves.
It's a lot, y'all.
It's exhausting.
It's a lot.
It's very exhausting.
Way more than you need to be worried about.
Yeah. And I find it hard in those conversations. I've found it in the past difficult to move past that. What I often find is there's such an obstinance about, like, well, no, these people think this about me, or I have such a low view of myself in relation to these people that now I've created this distance that can't be overcome.
Yeah, because really that's what they're saying. They're not saying, I mean, whenever you make a statement about, well, they think this, what you're really saying is I feel this way based on how I view myself and based on how I view them.
Yeah.
Because you can't know what anyone else thinks unless
you're God,
or unless they tell you. Like, unless someone just outright says, you know what,
somebody,
I'm better than you.
Yeah, if somebody has said to you, what is it? It's in the movie Baby Mama, where she's like,
so you think you're better than me?
She's like, I am certain that I am better than you. Like, if you have a situation like that where it's a very dysfunctional relationship, you can say with confidence, like, they do think they're better than me.
Yeah. But insecurity is really what we're, like, the root of what's going on in that situation, because insecurity is something that all of us deal with in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And insecurity, we've got a definition for y'all.
Yes.
Kylie Jo, would you hit them with
I would love to read the definition of
Please
insecurity.
do.
It is a feeling of general unease or nervousness that may be triggered by perceiving of oneself to be vulnerable or inferior in some way, or a sense of vulnerability or instability which threatens one's self-image or ego.
Ooh, I like that the definition has threatens your self-image.
Right.
That's so good, because that image that you put up in yourself, in your own mind.
And yourself of yourself.
In yourself, for yourself, by the people, for the people. That image is, it's so fickle.
Yeah.
And it's based on how we feel. It could be based on if you had, a breakfast burrito that morning, or if you had some Kellogg's Corn Pops. Like it. Yeah. So it could be all of your situation wrapped up in that moment. I know there are days. I think I just told you this the other day. Like, we'll go to the gym, and right after you leave the gym, you always feel like so fit. And
your muscles are tight.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and then like 15, 20 minutes later, you'll look and be like, did I even go to the gym? Everything's all loose and string beanie,
right?
And so, but like that insecurity just seeps in because the image that I automatically put up in my mind is shattered by whatever I see around me.
Well, and if you think about it, in the gym too, oftentimes there's a mirror where you get to see yourself doing the work.
Yeah.
And I always feel a greater sense of satisfaction when I can look and see, one, that I'm doing it correctly.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I'm good. Especially if I'm the only one in the gym.
Yeah, because it changes when somebody else walks in.
When somebody else is in there, like, getting it.
Yeah, let that muscle head come in there.
Dang,
Excuse me. I don't know if you guys saw our episode with our brother Frankie Shane. Right. Frankie Shane is swole.
I don't want to work out in the same gym as Frankie. I mean,
Frankie, we love you, bro,
Frankie,
but I'm gonna have to go when you leave. That way, I don't feel. You know what I mean? Because this is insecurity. I don't ever think, oh, they think they're stronger than me.
No.
First off, I can see they're stronger than me because they're lifting more weight. But that thought in other areas of life seep in, of like, man, they think they're better. They think they're more talented. They just think, and the other people generally are unaware of whatever it is you're talking about.
And and especially in the gym, this one just hits right now. The gym analogy is just working. Like, I remember at one time, man, I was probably in high school, and my family and I, we would go to the gym, like on base. We would go to the Air Force Base. And I would be like, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me. You know, like as a teenager, it's like the number one thing you think. And so I would want to dress cute and blah, blah, blah. And realizing later, like nobody in here is ever looking at, first of all, this kid in here with her family.
At least they shouldn't be.
Right. But also like as an adult, I get in there and I realize I am so self-focused in the gym. Yeah. I'm never looking like, how much weight are they lifting? I need to make sure I'm lifting at least as much as they are.
Or more.
But I'm never thinking about like, oh wow, they're really weak. I'm not doing that kind of like other people critiquing. I'm more looking at myself. But then how easy is it for me to think like, oh no, do they see me not be able to lift that many weights? I start to then internalize all of this like comparison and insecurity.
Yeah. And we start, for some reason, we put our value in those moments, in that comparison, in situations where normally we wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So like thinking about like church, like they think they're better than me. If you ran into that person outside of church, would that thought even come into your mind?
At the grocery store.
Yeah. Like, oh, they're buying lemons. They think they're better than me because
they're buying organic.
Yeah. Like,
wow.
Like that thought normally doesn't even come into your mind.
Right.
But as soon as you start comparing yourself to someone, then you start putting your identity in something that is trivial. You start putting your identity in something that truly you might not even care that much about.
Yeah.
Right? Like the way you dress or the car you drive, it might be fine, 8 days out of the week because there's 7 days.
Yes.
But until you pull up on that person driving that Benz, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I'm less of a person now.
Well, and what this is, it's what scripture talks about, putting confidence in the flesh.
Okay.
When we equate our worth and our value and our ability to contribute to society to what we physically or tangibly can bring. We're putting confidence in our works. We are works-based righteousness. We are making a law of something that is not a law. That's good. I see that a lot with mom culture.
Oh, yeah.
Truthfully. And it happens so...
Sorry, am I allowed to say yeah? Because I'm not a mom.
Oh, yeah, you're totally allowed. Everyone can see it. Even if you're not a mom, if you're a dad, if you're just like an
I just want to make sure, because sometimes like if a man speaks up on any issue like that surrounds women's lives, women are like, you can't say that.
That is called sexism. That's called reverse sexism.
It's not.
No, just kidding.
Stop it. Stop that.
No, but
anyway,
truthfully, with mom culture, it happens so much because like, and I remember feeling this and being like, why do I feel this? Why do I feel the need to one up another mom? Like, oh, well, my baby slept through the night. Well, my baby sleeps through both nights.
My baby slept the whole week. Wait, that's not healthy. They shouldn't be.
Yeah, and in this, I think mom culture is even more toxic because it not only puts all this identity stuff on the mother, but now we begin using our children as leverage. I really can't stand those conversations where you may. I remember the first time I had this conversation with another mom, and I was like, "Wait, are we competing right now?"
Yeah,
because I'm not doing that. Like, I had to stop it right in that moment because it was like, "Oh, well, did Isaiah do this at this age? Because my child's been doing it." And I was like, well, I'm not interested in comparing two children from two genetic pools that are completely different, number one.
With two different upbringings.
Two different like
temperaments.
There's no reason to compare. But there is this instant like, well, my worth as a mother is based on the performance of my child. Well, no, sis. That's a lie from the pit of hell.
Yeah.
Your worth is based on who God says you are.
Yeah.
And certainly we want to do our work with excellence, but I feel like there's just such a toxicity, especially in mom culture, where it's like, oh, well, you're not using cloth diapers, you're not using organic, or you're not making your own baby food. Oh, wow, well. And
then you went back to work.
Then it's, oh my goodness. Yeah. Or you didn't go back to work. Wow. Like that's terrible for you. And there's this instant feeling of like, oh, you think you're better than me.
Yeah. Well, and from a gentleman that are watching, for the fellas. This is for the fellas.
That was a woman tangent.
That's okay. No, that was good because it's important to see that. And men feel pressure in a different way, though. Men feel pressure when it comes to providing for income. And so when men get together, the first question, if you just meet somebody, generally the first question is like, hey, what do you do? What do you do for a living? The underlying cultural understanding is we're about to rank the pecking order. We're about to see kind of where you are. And it's never like, your response, just a little tip for the fellas out there. Your response isn't to get in that pecking order, isn't based on what you do. It's based on your confidence in what you do. I've learned this.
Ooh, that's good.
Because
that's good.
If, my brother for a while, my oldest brother, he had a mobile car wash. So he had all this stuff. He would drive around to different parts of the city and he would wash cars. And I remember him having a conversation with a person and they're like, hey, what do you do? And, well, my brother was talking to them and they said they did something very like fancy, right? Lawyer or something. And my brother was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I own my own business and we do this and we do this and do this. And like the way he said it, he just had confidence. It didn't matter that he was washing cars, right? And so in those situations, we allow somebody else's stature or what we ascribe that stature to mean to affect our confidence in our own being. And it stirs up our insecurity. And like when you're talking to other, like as a dad or as a husband, and another husband's like, oh yeah, I just bought my wife this. I just bought my kids this. We just went on vacation here. All of a sudden as a dad, it's like, oh, I'm less of a dad because I can't do that. I wasn't able to do. Oh man. But I've never felt they think they're better than me. I felt I'm not good enough.
I'm not measuring up.
Exactly.
Well, and that's that instability.
Yes.
That threatens your self-image. Like that's that vulnerability that, oh my goodness. And we've talked about the root of that so often, going back to the garden or going back to like the foundation. Yeah. The fall of humanity. But more than understanding where it comes from, we need to really know like all the different ways that it affects our relationships, all the different ways, like there's no human being ever that has not experienced some form of insecurity other than Christ. Christ had complete security. That's why we look to him as our security. But it's so common for us to feel this, yet it is so normal for us to minimize it.
That's good.
It's so like, well,
that's
I don't,
important.
because, and it's crazy because at the same time that we try to reduce or make it seem like we don't feel insecure, we are highlighting and magnifying it. Like,
oh, wow.
Like I look at social media, like
straight up. Yeah.
I know that I'm like, okay, well, I just want to talk about, this vacation I went on. But yet the way I'm doing it at times, I'll find that fleshly impulse of like, well, I want to make sure that everybody knows I had a great time.
I'll make sure it was an awesome vacation.
It was a great vacation. And we're so blessed, right? Because as Christians, we want to make sure people know that we're blessed.
Hashtag blessed.
With everything that we get.
Yeah.
And we get to do. And so there's a part of me that's like, oh man, now I'm posturing.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to make it seem like I have security in something. When that was never the thing that I'm supposed to point people to.
That's
right. The vacation I went on or the gift. And especially at Christmas time, I feel like it is so common. I just want you to know, personal problem that I have, pet peeve. I hate posting pictures of Christmas gifts.
Oh, you hit them plosives.
Sorry,
I
really hate it because I think maybe I'm a little old school or maybe I'm being kind of a boomer in this, but I'm like, back in the day, you got a Christmas gift?
Back in the day.
Back in my day, kids.
We had to develop our pictures at Walgreens.
Yes, and you didn't post it for people. You put it in the family scrapbook. Or here's the thing, you didn't take a picture at all. You just enjoyed the freaking gift. I don't know. That's just a weird thing.
It's odd. And I think
just a small
antiquated. You're a dinosaur now.
I know.
But that's important about the posting this stuff. Like people do it with their people did it during Thanksgiving, right? People were posting the pictures of their food. First off, why? Everybody's eating the same thing.
And it don't look good. Y'all, it don't look good.
You're not professional food picture takers. Photographers, that's the word.
You're not a food picture taker.
You're not. And so all you're doing is posting pictures of food. But what about those people that can't eat, right? Like you're insecure because you want everybody to know, like, oh man, everybody else is posting.
I want you to know that I ate well.
I want to make sure that everybody knows, look at what I'm eating. And somebody else is looking at you and you're stirring insecurity in them. And so the same thing with Christmas. Like I get posting pictures of Christmas decorations and stuff that's like actual cute things. But don't post pictures of your kids' presents and being like, oh, they were so excited to get this thing that they loved.
It's just, it's
not good.
Well, or here's the thing, if you do, because I don't want to like make a stumbling block or create a law for somebody. If you do, the question that is helpful for you is, why am I doing it?
Yeah.
Does, as a believer, especially, the greater responsibility, is posting this going to lead someone closer to Jesus, or is it going to cause some sort of issue in them, a spiritual issue, a relational issue? Because if you can't answer that honestly, then I would say don't post it.
Well, and one of the reasons we post pictures, I know, is so that family that we're not near can see.
Absolutely, yeah.
When it comes to things like gifts and stuff like that, I found tagging people specifically or sending them a direct picture or
text messaging.
Man, private groups.
Marco Polo
are the stuff. Marco Polo, just so that person can see, hey, they got your gift. This was awesome.
Yeah.
So grateful for the family. Like all that stuff's good. But yes, look at your heart. Are you doing it because you're insecure and you're trying to overcome that or what?
Yeah, that's good.
And scripture tells us over and over again about how comparison is not good.
Yes.
How buying into the culture of insecurity is not who we're called to be as believers in Christ, because we have an eternal security that goes beyond the temporal. Yeah. And so one of the verses that just came to mind is when Paul says, it's not I who live, but Christ in me.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this understanding of it's not I who live, but Christ in me is like, okay, if it's not you that you're living your life for, then you shouldn't be fighting for your own personal security in your image and your status. And Jesus even says, whoever seeks to save his life, insert image, whoever seeks to save his image, his persona, his status, will lose it.
Yeah.
But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. And so,
and Paul, we know that most of what Paul wrote was from prison. And there's a point, I think is it in Philippians, where he's talking about people who are preaching Christ from selfish gain. And it's like this understanding of like, I rejoice all the more. Paul could deliver the word.
Yeah.
He planted churches. He poured into preachers, and he led a movement of people. And he could have easily been like, wow, these people are threatening my sense of security and status. But he even says, like, in another part, all of these things, like, he has all these reasons he could boast in the flesh, but he counts it all as loss compared to the surpassing worth of Christ. And like, I haven't reached that place in my maturity yet.
I'm still striving though. I'm trying to get there.
I find myself like, wow, Paul, like you could write that stuff from prison, and he did have all of these things. It's like, wow, he was a Jew of the Jews.
Well, and people were rubbing it in his face. Sorry, this just came to me. Like, I think it's Galatians. I don't remember. Y'all, as a pastor,
It's in the Bible
at remembering specific addresses of scripture. I know the stories.
It's not like you've been in seminary the past however many years.
I mean, I read the Bible. I know it's in anyway. But when people are stirring Paul up and they're basically like challenging his authority as an apostle.
Yeah.
And Paul was like, okay, some follow Apollo, some follow me. Who cares? Who are we? You know what I mean? He's like, it's not about us. And so like Paul, even when people were trying to rub insecurity in his face, people were like, oh, you're not even that good of a pastor. You're a terrible preacher.
And he's like,
he's like, it's about Jesus. Why are you trying to make this
about
homie?
Me? I feel like he was like,
I don't know. I feel like Paul was like the dude who you just never wanted to argue with. Because like whenever, like, you know what I mean? You know those people like, I'm not even going to say nothing because I know Paul's going to go off.
Paul's going to have something to say.
It's going to be a whole 3-hour dissertation on why what I said wasn't Christ-like. So I'm just going to let it slide.
Right.
And so.
Because Paul did have some, he would fire back. He would clap back, but it wasn't in that way. It wasn't in the fleshly way.
If you ever
it was a spiritual clap back.
Philemon, he kind of put some holy guilt on your boy.
Or even in Galatians, like, am I now seeking the approval of man?
Yeah, like
what? Tell me whose approval that I really go ahead and tell me whose approval I need.
Paul was double OG.
And if I was still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ.
Yeah.
Straight up. If I am who you say I am. But and there's so many things about comparison that I remember I didn't really think about the Bible actually speaking about it. But like he says, like, let each one test his own work. In other words, don't go in your neighbor's kitchen. Try to figure out what they making.
Yeah, there's a line Andy Mineo says, "Don't let your food get cold looking at somebody else's plate."
I love that. That's a good one. But even like Romans 12 says, "Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world." We understand comparison and putting our worth in our works is a worldly thing. That really is a pattern of this world. Yeah. And so not being conformed to that is an act of the will. It's a truly intentional thing we have to do. It's not just we think of the worldly things as like, well, don't sin, don't be mean, don't drink, don't be debaucherous and all. Well, it's that, but it's also don't buy into these systems of value that actually deplete you as a human being.
Take away from your true identity. And Paul says in 2 Corinthians, he says, not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves.
Come on.
But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding. Yeah. And so he's telling you that when you are operating in comparison, you're operating without understanding, without biblical, godly understanding. That's good. And so, comparison in general is just not what we're called to do. Yeah. Also, one of my favorite verses when it comes to comparison, because comparison and insecurity has to do with you not being secure in who you're called to be. And we talked about this in a Inner Circle episode about what's the one we just did?
Making peace with your imperfections.
Thank you. Making peace with your imperfections, about coming to terms with your giftings. And so Paul talks about us being a body, and he says, like, the eye can't say to the hand, I'm not part of the body because I'm not the hand, and the foot can't, he's talking about all these different parts of the body, even ones that seem lesser, quote unquote. And he even says, like, the parts that seem lesser, we give more honor and more dignity. Absolutely. Like, you cover up your bits, you know what I mean? You cover those up.
You better.
Yeah, you should be covering your bits. But he's saying, like, the parts that seem insignificant or even bad, quote unquote, you actually give them more dignity. Yeah. And so as a part of the body of Christ, whatever gifting you have to understand that God has gifted you and called you to be a part of wherever you are for a special purpose.
Yeah.
Just something he's given you, your identity.
That's right.
And so you have to be secure in that.
Yeah. And honestly, like going back to, we gave the kind of the example at the beginning of people saying like, well, I can't go there. I can't do this because they think they're better than me. The question that came to me, or something that the Lord hit me with in one of those conversations, was like, to ask oneself, self,
that's what I call myself when I talk to myself. I said, self.
Do they think they're better than me, or do I think that they're better than me? Because this is another side of the insecurity thing, is a low self-esteem. And of course the answer isn't having higher self-esteem. The answer isn't, we've seen through movements of like the self-esteem gospel and all, like that actually damages our self-worth and self-image. But I think the problem we have more often is not that other people think they're better than you. A lot of times you actually think, because of what they have or what they do or who their friends are or the job that they do, that they're better than you, because you don't have a healthy view of self. You don't have a healthy understanding of how much you are loved and how much has been poured out for you. And this happens for believers as much as non-believers. This is something that I think every Christian, at a certain point, we have to start to tear down those things that we've built up as our worth makers.
Yeah.
And
worth makers. That's
worth
good.
makers.
I like that.
But also, like, in ministry, we hear it a lot. I really hate, this is one, again, man, I'm not trying to be like pet peevey today.
Stop being a hater.
I'm being a hater today. But there's things that I'm just like, oh, Satan, you suck, because you put this thought in someone's mind. But it's like, well, I can't preach because I just don't have that. And I'm not as good as a singer as this person. And it's like, man, the comparison here.
Yeah.
It is just, it's so rampant, and we don't even realize what it is. And the hard part is to even call it out. We're starting to step on toes.
Yeah.
When you start to say, okay, sis, bro, you're comparing yourself. You're comparing that person's gift to what God has called you to do, and that's not godly. But then instantly it's like, oh, now you think you're better than me.
Well, the reason it steps on toes is because you're calling someone out in an area that they've placed their identity. So you're stepping on a worth maker. You're challenging something that they have set up in their ideology of the way the world works, that this is what gives you worth. This is what gives you value. And so when you come to someone and you say, you think that gives you, that doesn't give you value. Well, if they don't have anything underneath that to undergird who they are,
it's crumbled.
Then you're attacking their personhood. And so as believers in Christ, we have to feed people their identity at the same time as destroying these idols that they've made. I did my...
You build and then you pull it down. It's a
handography I'm doing right here.
It's a 90s dance.
It's okay. That's what you do.
Video.
So if anything we've said today doesn't strike a nerve, or if you're sitting there still being like, yeah, I know some people that deal with that.
Oh.
I know someone that needs to hear this. First, awesome. Share this with them.
That's great.
But also do some evaluations. Are you putting your worth in things that are external? Are you putting, like, does it mean that you're a success because you measure up to XYZ?
Yeah.
Does it mean that you have more value because you can do XYZ? Look at your life and look at what you truly feel gives you value as a person.
Yeah.
And if it's not who Christ has made you, then you're dealing with some insecurity in your life.
Yeah. And so we want to give you some of these tools. The very first thing, as with everything we've been discussing lately, you cannot fix yourself or free yourself or make yourself more secure. This is not something in and of yourself
your own
you're going to muster up. And I think if you're like me and you've tried to put your worth in other things, if you found those worth makers to be worthless, you already know this. Like, man, it doesn't matter how many times that like button gets clicked.
Right.
I still feel empty. It doesn't matter how many times I go to my bank account and I see there's lots of money in it. I still don't feel.
Oh, I'm still waiting for that, Lord. Come on, Jesus.
It doesn't matter how much my children accomplish that shines back on me as a parent. I still feel empty. And that's good. Okay. That's good. We should feel that. We should feel the weight of that, because truthfully, it's only upon meditating on the security of God's character that we can start to move toward being free from this, that we can, and it's hard because it's like, don't do. Yeah. Like, while we say practically, here are things you can do, it's the don't do. It's the don't strive for this. It's simply meditate. And that's not just thinking every now and then. Yeah. It's not just, oh, wow, God, thanks for making me gifted. No. Who is God?
Yeah.
What does his character show in his word? It's unchanging.
Yeah.
He is steadfast. Look at all of if you just look up on Google promises of God's character or attributes of God, and you go to the word and you find those things, that is where we need to meditate and find the security of who he is first.
And then know your worth, your individual worth. And we did an episode on this with our homeboy Is 316.
You got to watch it.
Go back, check that out.
Got to watch it.
But it's important to gather from that your worth is not found externally. One of the most beautiful thoughts that I think you can grasp as a human being is that God created you as the crown jewel of all creation.
Ooh.
That God looked at the earth, and at this point in time, he decided that your gifts, your talents, that your abilities were needed. And so understand that you being you is enough, that God created you. Now, don't take this as like, you don't need God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you don't have to change to be someone else, that God created you, and by his power and through his gifting and through his ability in you, he has endowed you with worth.
Imputed.
No, you have your own worth because you are a creation that God values.
Yeah. And there are so many other tips that we could throw in here, but this last tip we want to give you is really all about accepting that what other people think of you is none of your business. We've talked about this before.
Come on.
We've jokingly said like, it's none of your business, but we really want to dive into this with our inner circle. This is something we want to kind of go into a separate episode about. How do you come to accept that this is none of my business, what you think of me, in a healthy way, not in a negative, like, well, whatever, it's not my business, but truthfully, like, okay, that doesn't matter. It doesn't change who I am. Even if you're thinking something about me that is less than what I think of myself.
Thank you guys so much for listening. If you've listened this far, all the way to the end, you're a rock star.
Yes.
Please share this with somebody you know, somebody that you love, somebody that you know could benefit from knowing how to overcome insecurity in their life.
Yes. Well, this has been the NixMyth Podcast. We hope you've gotten a dose of real life.
No myth.
Be blessed.